When therapist Danielle Orsini met successful stockbroker Tom Abrams, she went from treating her patients to getting the royal treatment herself.
Everything about Tom was intriguing. This extravagant bling life was really a whole new world for me.
But Danielle's well-trained eye couldn't see the scratches in Tom's shiny veneer.
People saw his success and wondered what the secret was.
He created a false persona, and none of that was true.
Even Danielle couldn't believe the villain hiding behind her prince.
Calculated. He knew what he was doing.
I was stunned. He really just devastated so many lives.
When it comes to love and marriage, things aren't always as they seem. A girl with beauty and brains, Danielle Orsini had the world at her feet. And in the spring of 1993, the 29-year-old decided it was time for a change of scenery. She moved from the Big Apple to sunny Palm Beach, Florida.
I found New York to be much more aggressive and fast-paced, and I really wanted to get away from that. So for me, Florida was a much healthier environment. I found the people to be much friendlier. I knew this is where I wanted to live.
But finding time to meet some of those friendly people wasn't so easy.
I worked so many hours. Dating just was not a part of my life. I wasn't even sure how I would be able to fit it in.
So when her friends suggested she check out the local classified ads for a date, Danielle decided to give it a go. And one soon struck her fancy. A successful businessman looking for a professional woman.
It wasn't someone to just have a good time with. The ad was more maybe looking for a meaningful relationship, and I liked that. So I actually called.
The man who answered was 31-year-old Tom Abrams. And what followed was a 3-hour marathon conversation.
Tom told me that he went to a very well-respected university in South Florida. That's where he pursued his MBA and also played football. He also shared that he was a stockbroker and that he owned his own firm. So I was very intrigued.
An academic, an athlete, and an entrepreneur. Everything about Tom seemed too good to be true. Danielle hung up the phone feeling eager to meet Tom in person. A couple days later, she got her chance.
On our first date, we went to a local movie theater to see an animated kids movie. He wasn't just a businessman in a suit. He could also have a more playful, fun side to him. Of course, I loved that.
As more thoughtful dates followed, the middle-class New York girl found herself in an upper-class fairy tale.
There was a lot of whining and dining. He always bought me beautiful, beautiful jewelry. So this was really a whole new world for me.
Danielle definitely fell hard and fast for Tom. It was a whirlwind. He swept her off her feet.
Behind all the presents and pampering, a genuine love began to flourish.
I was very comfortable with him. It just seemed like this was just a perfect fit, a perfect match.
So after just 4 months of dating, Danielle was ecstatic when Tom popped the question.
We knew we both wanted to be married and we both wanted to have a family. So I was very, very excited. It was all part of the fairy tale.
A few weeks before the wedding, Danielle decided it was time for her to do something special for Tom.
I had wanted to put together a scrapbook. I really was interested in getting pictures from his college football days because memorabilia was really important to me.
But when Danielle asked Tom about the photos, his response took her by surprise.
He told me that he had lived in a trailer and that there was a fire and that everything was destroyed. He had lost all of his pictures, all of his degrees, everything was gone. And I was just devastated to hear that.
Danielle could tell it was a sensitive subject for Tom, so she decided to focus on their future instead of Tom's past. A few months later, the two lovebirds tied the knot in a small ceremony with just their closest friends and family in attendance.
It was a fairy tale wedding right there on the lake. I can remember walking down and the harpist playing. It was beautiful.
It was definitely a storybook relationship, so she was very happy. It doesn't get any more perfect than that.
With 2 words, I do, a simple girl from Queens became a Palm Beach princess and officially joined the privileged world of Tom Abrams.
We were going to begin our life together, and it was going to be a perfect life.
But all that glitter was not gold. And behind Tom's sparkly exterior was a very dark secret. One that would turn Danielle's fairy tale into a nightmare.
He was definitely a master manipulator.
This guy knows what he's doing.
I never could have prepared myself for how terrifying things would become.
In the summer of 1994, newlyweds Danielle and Tom Abrams were living the high life.
We were really enjoying being newlyweds. He was working full-time, and we then opened my counseling center. And about 6 months later, I was pregnant. Tom was just delighted to hear that his first child would be a son, and someday would be the heir to his business.
But every prince needs a castle, and Tom decided an upgrade was in order. So the couple soon found themselves buying a luxurious house in the prestigious Aero Club.
People like to say, oh, I live in the Aero Club, and people knew where the Aero Club was. They had their own landing strip, and you actually land your private plane in your backyard. So it was a status symbol for Tom.
But with the purchase of the new home, Danielle noticed Tom's spending went beyond luxurious. It became downright gluttonous.
I took a small trip to New York, and when I came back, he had leased a Ferrari.
Tom bought a race car. He bought a plane. And I thought, wow, that's a lot. When it came to toys, there were no boundaries. If he wanted it, he was going to buy it.
As Tom's spending got more and more out of hand, Danielle became increasingly uneasy.
It was always bigger and bigger and bigger. And on a moral level, that worried me. But Tom would explain that it was necessary because he managed people's money and you had to make a good impression. So I was torn between 2 worlds.
When their son was born in August of 1995, Danielle became more disenchanted by Tom's world when it seemed he had no interest in spending time with her or their new baby.
He wouldn't be home from the office until really late, and that was difficult. But again, he had to run the business. He was managing the finances of some prominent people, and he had to present the image and live it out.
Not that Danielle's husband wasn't at times gracious with money. Tom had, after all, started the Phoenix Foundation to raise funds for charities benefiting needy kids.
Abrams' chief claim to fame was his charity that was doing so much good work down here in South Florida. And he was a gregarious guy, and he knew how to throw a party.
He launched his first charitable grand-scale event. Tom was rubbing elbows with celebrities and athletes and high society. This was definitely an image builder.
While Tom focused on his reputation, Danielle focused on family. And in May of 1997, the couple welcomed a second child into the world. This time, a baby girl.
I hoped that when we had the second baby, maybe he would be home more, maybe he would be more involved.
But as Tom's work hours increased, so did Danielle's suspicions. She couldn't help but wonder if something else, or someone else, was keeping her husband away.
He would tell me he was at business meetings until late.
I have to work late. You know this.
I'd wonder, was he really at a business meeting? Was there something else going on? I would question him, and he would really get angry.
Don't question me about my work. You know.
So then that would just stop that. The message was clear. Don't ask.
But that fall, Danielle was forced to set her suspicions aside when Tom came home with some troubling news that would change everything.
He had all the outward signs of success. It took everyone aback.
No one had any idea of what Tom was capable of doing.
I remember being in a full-blown panic.
In the fall of 1997, Danielle Abrams was stunned when her husband Tom came home with some disturbing news.
I could see that he was a little more rattled or uptight than his normal, confident composure. Tom told me that a particular client invested money with him, but her husband was not comfortable.
I just want to know, what do you want from here?
He wanted her to get the money back.
Which for Tom was easier said than done.
Tom told me it wasn't as quick as the husband expected to get the money back. There were some glitches.
Tom admitted his clients were now starting to question his business practices.
It really caused a stir. People became very angry, very resentful.
Danielle started to hear just little talk, little gossip around town. She thought something was not right. I didn't know where the stigma ends, if it's going to have any backlash on my friend.
We had an alarm system on the home, but I still did not feel real safe. In my mind, we were becoming more and more of a target. I started to become really fearful for our children's safety. I remember being in a full-blown panic.
To keep her family out of the crosshairs, Danielle thought it was best to maintain a low profile.
I told him very definitively, I know you need an image and an impression, but we need to downsize our lives.
We need the house. We need the membership. We need all these things.
And he did not like the idea of it at all.
I don't want to hear another word about it.
Instead, in an effort to repair his reputation, Tom's spending hit a whole new level. His largest and most extravagant purchase being a $100,000 membership to Palm Beach's most exclusive private club, the Mar-a-Lago.
With each new toy that Tom purchased, he was putting his family, his wife and children at risk. I went into protective mode.
One night in April of 1999, Danielle finally put her foot down.
When we had finished dinner with the kids and gave them their baths and put them to bed, I told him that I really felt like something needed to change. But he made it very clear to me, if you're not on my team, helping me reach my goals,
Then I don't need you.
he literally went into the master bedroom, took some trash bags, filled them, and moved out. And I was speechless.
I think in Tom's eyes, she was just supposed to enjoy her children and everything that she had and not question anything he was doing.
I was in a lot of pain, but I had to do it. Divorce was the only option at that point.
In December 2000, after 5 years of marriage, Danielle and Tom's divorce was final. But as the year went on, Danielle got wind of his new life through mutual friends.
The divorce definitely did not slow Tom down. He was schmoozing every night at different Palm Beach events, black tie events.
Despite appearances, Danielle's gut feeling was that Tom's world was closing in on him.
I could see his extravagant and reckless behavior just really ramping up, and he just couldn't keep going in that direction. It was going to blow up in his face.
Danielle had no idea how right she was until November 8th, 2001, when she turned on the news and finally discovered the devastating secret that Tom had been hiding all along.
There were so many lies. It was catastrophic.
He knew what he was doing. He intentionally hurt people.
It was devastating to hear the magnitude of what he had done.
On November 8th, 2001, Danielle Abrams turned on the television and was astonished to see her ex-husband Tom on the local news.
There were FBI guys all around Tom's house. They were reporting that he was arrested. I just was stunned.
Danielle sat in disbelief as the news report announced that Tom Abrams had been arrested for masterminding a multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme.
A classic Ponzi scheme is when you take new investors' money to pay off old investors and probably take a slice of it yourself. Abrams represented that he had managed more than $1 billion, when in fact he had far, far less.
After an anonymous tip prompted the FBI to take a closer look at Tom's business, what they found was astonishing.
He created these false statements. He told people that he was investing their money. And in fact, he took in almost $70 million from victims.
Danielle was shocked to learn that Tom had been scamming investors throughout their entire marriage.
Everything that I believed to be true about my husband was not as it appeared. It was hard because he really just devastated so many lives.
The worst part of Tom's scam, however, was whom he was scamming.
The types of investors that Tom Abrams had in his company were some of the most vulnerable people that he knew. Most of them were retirees and elderly people who were looking for a safe place to put their money.
Little did they know their money was gone the moment it exchanged hands.
One of the more heart-wrenching stories involved a man whose wife was dying of cancer and lost in the neighborhood of $750,000 because Tom Abrams cleaned out his accounts.
After the press aired Tom's dirty laundry, Danielle was able to trace his lies all the way back to when they met.
He was lying about his education, the fire that destroyed all of his pictures and memorabilia, because there was no record of Tom attending that university or playing football there. He created this whole personality. In the end, my husband not only committed fraud, but turned out to be a fraud.
On September 30th, 2002, Tom Abrams pled guilty to 15 counts of fraud and money laundering related to his Ponzi scheme and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. And Danielle lost everything she'd gained in her divorce settlement, given that it was investors' money, not Tom's.
I don't miss that lifestyle for a moment. How do you compensate for the loss and the damage and the devastation to so many lives? I think that's a tough one that I've carried.
Today, Danielle and her 2 children, now teenagers, are thriving despite their family's ordeal.
It's been difficult for my children, but our faith and dependence on God is really what has carried all of us through.
Danielle is very resilient. She's done very well for herself. She just went on with her life being a mom.
Through her experience, Danielle has learned that no one is immune to the powers of a con artist.
Being a trained mental health professional, I should have known better, but he knew exactly how to hook me in. So pay attention to the red flags. Better to be safe than sorry in the end.
For Amy Anderton, meeting a handsome, charismatic Irishman seemed too good to be true.
Logan was charming, he was flattering. He was always trying to help other people be positive.
But this sweet-talking do-gooder had a deviant secret.
Amy was disgusted. She had no idea what to do.
He was a master at suppressing who he really was.
And Amy would be forced to make the most frightening decision of her life.
She was looking over her shoulder everywhere we went.
I got a weapon and slept with it by my bed. I was scared for my life.
When it comes to love and marriage, things aren't always as they seem. In the spring of 2010, Amy Anderton was having the time of her life. The perky 28-year-old was newly single and enjoying every minute of it.
I was excited about love and romance, and I thought the world was my oyster, and there was a lot of fish in the sea.
So that March, while Amy was hanging out at an Irish pub in Portland, Oregon, she didn't mind when one of the other patrons approached her.
How you doing?
I was finishing my glass of wine, settling up my tab, and he nonchalantly started a conversation with me.
The charismatic 34-year-old introduced himself as Logan Storm.
He had a thick Irish accent. He started talking about how he was a school teacher and how he was a do-gooder.
What about you?
He asked me about my job and found out that I did community work for a nonprofit. He was very excited to hear about what I did for work.
We'll catch you later.
As the two went their separate ways, Amy didn't think much of the encounter until she arrived home and discovered a surprise from her new friend.
I found a little matchbook in my purse. It said, "The shy Irish fellow from the bar fancies you." He left his phone number on the note. His charismatic charm, it caught my interest. And I thought it was kind of sweet that he was saying he fancied me. So I sent him a text message. I wanted to see what it was about.
Logan responded right away and insisted on setting a date immediately the following night.
Cheers.
Before Amy knew it, they were having a romantic dinner in a quaint little restaurant nearby.
It was nice. It was good conversation, getting to know each other. He had a lot to say about growing up in Ireland. He told me that he had a son that lived with him part-time, 3 days a week. He was very flirtatious, and I was flattered.
Logan was keen to see Amy again that weekend, so she invited him to a barbecue, and instantly, her friends were hooked.
He was a nice guy. He was energetic, happy. He seemed to really care about Amy.
Logan seemed absolutely smitten with Amy. He was very starry-eyed over her. So I was encouraging Amy to see what becomes of this relationship.
Amy took her friend's advice and soon learned some interesting things about her new beau.
We were at a gathering with some friends, and I heard him talking about a former student who became a stripper.
Oh, she's actually a stripper. Really?
And he was mentoring her. I didn't give it much thought because he was always trying to help other people be positive and be their support.
But it wasn't until Logan began opening up about his own difficult past that Amy truly understood why staying positive was such a focus in his life.
He said that his dad spent time in a psychiatric hospital. So his mom thought that it was safer for him to grow up with his grandparents in Belfast, Ireland.
I was dating this girl for a little while, and she blew herself up making a film.
He never said specifically that he was involved with the IRA, but he alluded to that, and that's when they deported him.
Logan told Amy he eventually found his way back to Portland, where he'd managed to mend his relationship with his parents.
I admired him. I thought that it was great that he could grow up under such circumstances and become someone great.
But Amy would soon learn that this do-gooder was actually as bad as they come, as his vortex of lies pulled her into a world she never imagined.
I was just blown away at the levels of deception.
There was something mentally broken with him.
I was trying to make sense of what was going on. I felt gullible. I felt betrayed.
In the spring of 2010, Amy Anderton was starting to fall hard for her new Irish love interest, Logan Storm.
As a couple, we did a lot of different things together, getting to know each other, but I wanted to date for a little while and not rush into a relationship.
Amy was happy taking things slowly, especially when it came to meeting Logan's 12-year-old son. But Logan had other ideas, and he made them clear one Sunday morning in May.
Logan was going to pick up his son and specifically told me, "We're not coming back here directly, so take your time getting up and getting ready and let yourself out." So I was wandering around the house and making some coffee.
Before Amy knew it, she saw Logan and his son walking up the sidewalk.
I kind of freaked out and ran into his bedroom and shut the door. They came in and Logan said, "Son, Amy's still here. Would you like to meet her?" My heart sunk into my stomach and I just gulped. So I said, "Hi. Nice to meet you."
This is Amy.
I was kind of upset with him. It's like he wasn't respecting how I felt or my boundaries.
When Amy confronted him about it later that day, it was Logan who drew a line in the sand.
That made me feel really uncomfortable.
Oh, so it's all about you? Well, what about us?
He told me that he was not willing to invest in a relationship that wasn't going anywhere.
How are you supposed to have a relationship together without trust?
He wanted me to just let go and to just trust him.
So Amy decided to do just that, let go and take a chance.
That made an impression on me, and I thought that the relationship had potential to last forever.
But by the middle of May, Amy started to notice something was troubling her new boyfriend.
I could tell Logan was struggling financially. He talked about how it was hard for him to pay his bills. He said that he couldn't afford his house, and the only place that he could afford would be a little one-bedroom apartment.
And by the beginning of June, Amy couldn't take it any longer.
He made me feel like I had something that I could offer him to make his situation better. If I asked one of my roommates to move out, then he and his son could move into my house. So I offered it, and I was feeling pretty good about it.
It seemed an act of convenience for him to move in with her, as opposed to a conscious choice they made as a couple. But I was still emphasizing to Amy that I thought he was a catch.
Then, just a few weeks after Logan started to move in, their relationship was tested yet again.
It was about 11:30 p.m., and his phone rang.
Hi, Anne. Let's see what we can do.
He said, oh, it's my former student who's a stripper, and she wants a ride home from the strip club. My reaction to that was, well, that's not okay, and if you want to have a relationship with me, you can't have other relationships like that going on.
You should not be talking with this girl. No, come back here.
He turned it around on me and said that I was making a big deal and stormed out of the house. I felt like he was hiding things from me.
Soon, Amy would uncover exactly what Logan was hiding, and the horrific truth would haunt her forever.
Amy was incredibly disturbed.
I was scared of what I had found. It was shocking to me.
You need to set boundaries. No, this is ridiculous. What are you trying to do?
In June 2010, after fighting with her boyfriend Logan Storm about his mentorship of a former student-turned-stripper, Amy decided to confide in a friend.
She told me that she sensed something was wrong, and she told me I needed to look into it. It was not normal.
Come back here.
Amy initially resisted and went over to Logan's to talk with him instead.
Amy seemed freaked out that he didn't know what could be wrong with that. It was completely inappropriate.
We had a very serious discussion about boundaries, and I asked him to call his former student and set up a time to go out to lunch or coffee with her and set some good boundaries. So he took my advice, which made me feel good.
While Amy felt she was making progress with Logan, she couldn't ignore her gut.
There was still something deep down inside of me that was questioning if he was hiding things. I didn't really trust him.
So Amy decided to play detective. She had no idea this was merely the calm before the storm. On the morning of July 23rd, Amy waited for Logan to leave for work before looking through his things.
I was feeling like Logan was hiding something, and I wanted to see what he was hiding. He had a jewelry box on the dresser, and I looked in it and saw a thumb drive. It looked like it was tucked under things to be hidden. I wanted to see what was on it, so I plugged it into the computer. I wasn't able to process what I was seeing.
Oh my God.
It was shocking to me. I found hundreds of pictures of child pornography on it. Very explicit, disturbing images of little children that were being raped and abused. I was scared of what I had found, and I didn't know how to respond to it.
Heart racing, Amy returned the thumb drive to its hiding spot.
Logan came home from work.
How you doing?
All right.
He took one look at me and said,
You look like you've seen a ghost.
and my response to him was, no, I'm just stressed out. I was nervous about bringing it up. I thought that maybe he would hurt me, to keep me quiet, to not tell anyone.
The next morning, she told Logan she'd made 2 decisions.
I told Logan I needed a break, and I needed to go visit my family in Utah. And I told Logan that I needed him to move out before I got back. He screamed loud, just let out a bellowing scream, just clenched his fists and screamed at the top of his lungs. I became more scared of him.
Amy quickly left and arrived a few hours later at her family's home in Utah. Once safe and secure, she made the most important decision of her life.
I decided to turn him in. I called 911. They had me describe everything and what I saw.
There were children, and they were really graphic.
The police got a search warrant and went to the home shortly after that. They told Logan that they needed to search the premises. They feared they were going to find images of child pornography on his computer. Logan remained completely calm. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't surprised. The detectives confiscated the computer and the thumb drive, but they did not arrest him at that point. They wanted to make sure their evidence remained intact. They didn't want to lose any of it. They didn't want to jeopardize it.
As soon as authorities examined the images on the thumb drive, they immediately put out a warrant for Logan's arrest.
He fled very suddenly. That was certainly not the behavior of someone who had nothing to hide.
While investigators searched frantically for the fugitive, Amy cautiously returned home to Portland, only to discover that her nightmare had just begun.
We did not see this coming.
I felt afraid for my life. I didn't know what he was capable of.
In the summer of 2010, Amy Anderton was terrified after her ex-boyfriend Logan Storm went on the run.
I was pretty scared for my life. I knew that he knew it was me who found the child pornography and called the police. I didn't know where he went, but when I came home, all of my things had been gone through in my room, and my spare key was not in its place. I thought Logan had been involved with the IRA in Ireland, so I called the cops because I thought that he had planted a bomb in my car.
While police found no evidence of a bomb, they did have an explosive piece of news for Amy. There was no chance that Logan was ever affiliated with the IRA. In fact, he never lived in Ireland.
The cops started to tell me that Logan grew up in Portland, Oregon, and didn't have an Irish accent. It was all a lie. I was just in shock. It made me realize I did not know who he was, and therefore I didn't know what he was capable of. I got a weapon and slept with it by my bed. I changed the locks because every sound of anything woke me up thinking it was him coming after me and getting revenge for ruining his life.
Amy was terrified. No one knew where he was, and the stress was really getting to her.
As Amy battled a flood of emotions, she realized everything Logan had told her was a lie.
I don't believe that his father spent time in a psychiatric hospital. I think that Logan made all of those things up to make himself look like a victim. He was manipulating me.
Equally disturbing was how Amy felt Logan had clearly turned his own son into a chess piece.
I think he was using his son to move into my house. I think it looked good for him to live with me, to have a girlfriend who was doing this good work in the community, and he was using me just to get what he wanted. I felt gullible. I felt betrayed.
And the girl Logan said he was mentoring?
I don't know if the former student / stripper was just another one of Logan's lies. He was a predatory, deceptive liar.
I don't think anyone's ever going to know the truth about him. There's studies that show that people who are abusive have been abused before. I'm thinking that maybe he was a victim because he put himself in the victim role so much.
Meanwhile, after 7 months, Logan's attorneys located him hiding out in Europe. They convinced him to return to Portland, where he was officially booked for possession of child pornography.
I was very relieved when Logan was arrested, but it was so surreal.
On January 23, 2013, Logan Storm went to trial and pled not guilty.
I very much believe in our country and our laws. I respect the system and I respect the procedures.
Amy was forced to come face to face with the man she turned in.
The first time I saw him, I thought that I was going to be sick. I saw him do a double take, and I saw fear in his eyes. It made me feel powerful. I was protecting young children.
6 days later, the middle school teacher was convicted on one count of possessing child pornography. On September 10th, 2013, Logan Storm was sentenced to 8 years for his crimes.
I think he deserved harsher. Honestly, this guy is somebody that should not be on the streets, ever.
It wasn't the maximum, but it was enough to show that it was a severe crime. And I didn't have to look over my shoulder, and I didn't have to worry where he was.
Today, Amy is still dealing with the reality of what she went through.
I feel like my life will forever be changed from this because I'm scared to get close to people. I'm scared that people could be hiding things.
Even though she's not ready to fully trust others again, Amy refuses to let what Logan did affect her future.
Amy is such a strong, honest person, and she's maintained an attitude of strength and perseverance. I'm really proud of her for that.
I'm very hopeful that other people will follow my lead, but if I didn't have such great friends, I don't think I would have made it through it.
The night was too quiet for a scream to vanish without a trace. In the small California town of Ridgewood, December 1998 arrived with a chill that seeped into every crack of the sidewalks and every locked door, but no one imagined that the cold would settle inside the bones of the community for more than 2 decades. It began with a single flicker of porch light, a door left ajar, a car idling in a driveway long after midnight, and a silence so sudden it felt staged, as if the world itself had inhaled and forgotten how to breathe. By morning, the name Emily Carter was already echoing across police radios, whispered in trembling phone calls, scrawled on yellow notepads in the hands of exhausted detectives. A young woman, 24 years old, vanished in the span of minutes. No witnesses, no blood, no struggle, just absence, just a void where a life had been. Her apartment stood at the end of a narrow cul-de-sac, a quiet stretch of homes where neighbors recognized each other's footsteps, where unfamiliar engines drew curious glances through lace curtains. That night, no one heard anything unusual. No shouts, no crash, no gunshot, only the faint hum of a distant freeway and the ticking of kitchen clocks. Inside Emily's apartment, everything appeared frozen mid-moment. A mug half full of coffee sat on the counter, its surface cold and untouched. A jacket lay draped over the back of a chair, her keys still dangling from the lock of the front door. The television glowed with static, casting pale blue light across the living room floor. It looked less like a crime scene and more like a life interrupted, as if someone had reached into the room and simply erased her. Police combed the space inch by inch. They dusted for fingerprints, lifted fibers, sealed every object into evidence bags. They found no signs of forced entry, no overturned furniture, no shattered glass. The windows were locked, the door frame unmarked. To seasoned investigators, it suggested something far more disturbing than a random attack. It suggested familiarity, trust. Someone Emily knew, someone she had let close enough to cross her threshold without fear. Yet her friends and coworkers struggled to name a single person who fit the profile. She was careful, reserved, kind but cautious. She worked at a local medical supply company, kept a tight circle, spent most evenings at home with books or music. Her routine was predictable, her habits steady, her life seemingly safe. That was what terrified everyone. If Emily Carter could vanish without a trace, so could anyone. Within hours, Ridgewood transformed. Patrol cars lined the streets. Search dogs paced through backyards and wooded strips behind the neighborhood. Helicopters carved slow arcs across the sky, their rotors chopping through the stillness. Volunteers formed search parties, combing drainage ditches, empty lots, abandoned sheds. Her photograph spread across television screens and newspaper front pages, her smile frozen in time beneath headlines screaming, "Mysterious disappearance," and "Community in shock."
Tips poured in.
Sightings were reported from gas stations, bus stops, freeway ramps. Each lead ignited a spark of hope, only to fizzle into nothing. Every dead end tightened the knot of dread around the town's collective chest. Days passed, then weeks. The investigation expanded outward in widening circles, tracing Emily's last known movements. She had left work at 6:12 p.m., stopped briefly at a grocery store, purchased a frozen meal and a loaf of bread, exchanged a few polite words with the cashier, and driven straight home. Surveillance footage confirmed her arrival at the apartment complex just after 7 p.m. After that, the timeline dissolved into darkness. No cameras. No confirmed sightings. Her phone stopped transmitting at 7:43 p.m., the battery still half-charged. The device later found crushed and discarded in a roadside ditch miles away. That discovery shifted the case from missing person to something far more ominous. Someone had taken deliberate steps to make her disappear. Detectives chased every thread. They interviewed neighbors, co-workers, old friends, former boyfriends, casual acquaintances. They scrutinized her bank records, her phone logs, her email. They reconstructed her final days hour by hour, searching for anomalies, for subtle deviations from routine that might signal danger. They found none. Emily had argued with no one. She owed no debts. She had no known enemies. The absence of motive gnawed at the investigation, turning each day into a frustrating cycle of effort and uncertainty. It became a cold case in slow motion, the momentum bleeding away as months slid into years. The community refused to let go. Candlelight vigils lit the town square. Yellow ribbons fluttered from mailboxes and street lamps. Her parents appeared on television, pleading for information, their voices cracking as they begged whoever knew something, anything, to come forward. Every anniversary reopened the wound. Each birthday passed like a quiet funeral. Children who had once played on her street grew up hearing her story as a cautionary tale, a reminder that safety was fragile, that evil could slip through even the smallest cracks. Behind closed doors, investigators wrestled with their own doubts. Had they missed something in those crucial first hours? Had a single overlooked detail held the key? Evidence boxes stacked in storage rooms, each labeled and cataloged, each containing fragments of a puzzle no one could complete. New detectives inherited the case, read through thick binders of reports, stared at faded photographs, and felt the same weight of unfinished business. Tips slowed to a trickle. Leads dried up. The file gathered dust, its pages yellowing, its urgency dulled by time. Officially, it remained open. Unofficially, hope thinned. Then, years later, technology advanced. DNA analysis grew sharper, more precise, capable of extracting profiles from microscopic traces once deemed useless. Old evidence was re-examined, swabbed, retested. In Emily's apartment, technicians had collected skin cells from the inside of a broken bracelet clasp found beneath the couch, a detail too small to matter in 1998, too ambiguous to anchor a suspect. Now, that fragment of genetic code glimmered with possibility. It was entered into national databases, compared against millions of profiles, and for months, the system returned only silence. Then, in the dead of night, a match appeared. The name belonged to a man who had never surfaced in the original investigation, someone who had lived just 3 miles from Emily's apartment in 1998, someone who had since drifted across state lines, leaving behind a trail of minor arrests, broken relationships, and unremarkable jobs. On paper, he was invisible. In the cold glow of a forensic lab, he was suddenly unavoidable. Detectives reopened the file, their pulse quickening as old questions resurfaced with violent clarity. Where had he been that night? How had he known Emily? Why had his DNA been in her living room? The past, long buried, began to claw its way back into the present. Surveillance teams tracked his movements, watched his routines, listened to his phone calls. He lived alone now, a quiet existence in a coastal town, his neighbors unaware of the shadow creeping closer each day. The arrest came just after midnight, a coordinated strike designed to prevent flight, to catch him in the most unguarded moment. Squad cars rolled in without sirens. Officers surrounded the small house, weapons drawn, hearts pounding. When they knocked, the man hesitated, then opened the door, squinting into the glare of flashlights. He offered no resistance. As the handcuffs clicked shut, the weight of 20 years settled into that narrow space between his wrists. News of the arrest detonated across Ridgewood like a delayed explosion. Phones rang. Social media erupted. Reporters flooded the streets that had once been draped in yellow ribbons. For some, it felt like vindication. For others, a reopening of scars that had never healed. Emily's parents learned the news in the early hours of the morning, their relief tangled with grief, their long vigil finally pierced by a truth that promised answers yet threatened to unearth unbearable details. The cold case was no longer cold. It was burning, fierce, and relentless, demanding to be fully seen. Yet even as the community braced for closure, investigators uncovered new layers of complexity. The suspect denied involvement, offered fragmented alibis, claimed fleeting acquaintance. His story shifted under pressure, small inconsistencies rippling outward into larger contradictions. Evidence linked him to the scene, but the narrative of that night remained elusive, a jagged silhouette against the dark. The closer they came, the more the mystery resisted resolution, as if the truth itself were determined to stay hidden. And so the story of Emily Carter surged back into the public consciousness, not as a memory, but as a living, breathing question. What truly happened in that silent apartment on a winter night in 1998? What forces converged to erase a young woman so completely, leaving only echoes and unanswered prayers? As the courtroom lights warmed and the cameras rolled, Ridgewood held its breath once more, aware that the answers, when they finally arrived, might change everything they thought they knew about their past, their neighbors, and the fragile line between safety and disappearance. The interrogation room smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee, a sterile space designed to drain emotion, yet the air felt charged, as if every molecule were vibrating with the weight of the past. The suspect sat alone beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, his reflection fractured in the two-way mirror, his eyes fixed on a point no one else could see. Outside, detectives shuffled through decades-old files, their fingers tracing faded ink, their minds racing through timelines that had once seemed hopelessly tangled. Every photograph, every witness statement, every fragment of forensic data was now being reassembled piece by piece into a story that had waited 26 years to be told. The cold case was breathing again, and with every breath, it exhaled secrets that refused to stay buried. They began with the simplest questions. Where were you on the night of December 14th, 1998?
Who did you see?
What did you do? The man's answers were slow, deliberate, rehearsed. He spoke of routine, of television, of an early night's sleep. He insisted he had never met Emily Carter, had never set foot in her apartment, had no explanation for how his DNA might have found its way there. His voice remained steady, but his hands betrayed him, fingers tapping against the metal table in a staccato rhythm that mirrored the pounding of his heart. Each denial tightened the room, compressing the silence until it felt almost physical. Detectives countered with evidence. The bracelet clasp, the crushed phone, the geographic proximity, the pattern of his past arrests, small offenses that hinted at impulse and volatility. With each revelation, a faint crack appeared in his composure, a fleeting hesitation before the next answer, a subtle shift in posture, a swallow that came too late. They pressed harder, circling back, rephrasing questions, testing the edges of his story. He adjusted, recalibrated, but the inconsistencies multiplied, tiny fractures spidering across his narrative until it threatened to collapse under its own weight. Outside the station, the town stirred. Morning light spilled across familiar streets, illuminating faces drawn with anticipation and dread. News vans parked along the sidewalks. Microphones clustered beneath the chins of officials. The name Emily Carter was once again on every tongue, spoken with reverence, curiosity, and fear. For younger residents, it was a story inherited, a local legend of darkness. For older ones, it was a reopened wound, a reminder of a time when innocence had been shattered. The community hovered between hope and terror, desperate for answers, yet bracing for revelations that might stain the past forever. Investigators turned back to 1998, reconstructing Emily's final weeks with renewed urgency. They revisited interviews, searching for overlooked details. One coworker remembered a man who had lingered near the building's entrance on several occasions, his presence vague, unremarkable, easily dismissed. A neighbor recalled a dark sedan idling near the cul-de-sac late at night, engine low, headlights off. At the time, these fragments had seemed too thin to pursue. Now, they pulsed with significance. The suspect owned a similar vehicle. He had worked briefly at a warehouse less than a mile from Emily's apartment. Their paths, once thought separate, now appeared dangerously close. Digital forensics uncover more. Old phone records revealed a series of brief calls from a prepaid mobile device to Emily's number in the weeks before her disappearance. The calls were short, never answered, their origin masked by anonymity. The device had been purchased in cash, its trail nearly invisible. But a single security camera, grainy and distorted, captured a figure at the checkout counter, his posture, his gait, his clothing eerily familiar. Analysts enhanced the footage, frame by painstaking frame, until the outline sharpened into a face that mirrored the man now sitting in custody. The coincidence was too precise to ignore. Under mounting pressure, the suspect's demeanor shifted. His denials grew brittle, his answers less fluid. He began to contradict himself, stumbling over details he had previously asserted with confidence. At times, he stared at the table as if searching its scratched surface for guidance. At others, he glared at the detectives, defiance flaring in his eyes. The interrogation stretched on, hours bleeding into one another, each moment a test of endurance and resolve. Still, the truth remained just beyond reach, a shadow retreating whenever they drew near. Meanwhile, forensic teams re-examined every piece of physical evidence with modern tools. Fibers from the carpet were matched to fabric found in the suspect's car, preserved in storage since a routine traffic stop years earlier. Soil samples from the undercarriage corresponded to a remote stretch of land near a dry riverbed, an area previously searched but never fully excavated. Cadaver dogs were brought in, their noses tracing invisible trails, their reactions sharp and sudden. In a shallow depression beneath tangled brush, they signaled the presence of human remains. The excavation was meticulous, slow, reverent. Each layer of earth was removed by hand, each fragment documented. When bone emerged, the air seemed to still. The remains were incomplete, scattered by time and exposure, yet unmistakably human. A tattered piece of fabric clung to one fragment, its pattern matching the jacket Emily had worn the night she vanished. The discovery struck the community like a physical blow. Vigils reignited. Flowers carpeted the town square. Grief, long dormant, surged back with devastating force. For Emily's parents, the call came at dawn. They listened in silence, their faces pale, their hands trembling. After years of uncertainty, they finally had confirmation of what they had always feared. The hope of reunion dissolved, replaced by the finality of loss. Yet alongside the sorrow was a fragile sense of resolution, the knowledge that their daughter's story might at last be told in full, that the questions haunting their every waking moment might finally yield answers. Back in the interrogation room, detectives revealed the discovery. The suspect's reaction was immediate. His breath hitched, his gaze flickered, And for the first time, his composure fractured completely. He slumped forward, elbows on the table, head bowed. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible, stripped of bravado, raw with something that might have been remorse or might have been fear. He admitted to knowing Emily, to crossing her threshold, to a confrontation that had spiraled beyond control. Yet even as he confessed, details remained obscured, his account fragmented, selective, riddled with gaps that begged further scrutiny. According to him, it had begun with a chance encounter at a gas station weeks earlier, a brief exchange that blossomed into an obsession. He watched her from a distance, learned her routines, convinced himself of a connection that existed only in his imagination. On that December night, he claimed, he had gone to her apartment intending nothing more than conversation, a misguided attempt to bridge the gulf between fantasy and reality. The argument that followed, he said, escalated quickly, voices rising, emotions flaring, until a single impulsive act changed everything. Panic seized him. He fled, leaving chaos in his wake, spending the next 2 decades haunted by the memory of a moment he could never undo. Investigators listened, recorded, cross-examined. They compared his statements against physical evidence, against timelines, against witness accounts. Some elements aligned with chilling precision. Others clashed, raising the possibility of minimization, of strategic omission. The truth, they knew, was rarely offered freely. It had to be extracted, carefully, relentlessly, from the tangled mass of fear, shame, and self-preservation. As word of the confession spread, public reaction oscillated between relief and outrage. Some saw justice finally taking shape. Others demanded harsher accountability, their anger fueled by the years stolen from a young life and from a grieving family. Editorials flooded local papers. Commentators dissected every development, every leaked detail, searching for meaning, for closure, for a narrative that could make sense of such profound loss. Yet beneath the noise, a deeper unease persisted. How had he gone unnoticed for so long? How many signs had been missed? What other stories lay hidden in the quiet corners of ordinary lives? The courtroom loomed on the horizon, its walls poised to absorb testimony, tears, and the weight of irreversible truth. Prosecutors assembled their case with meticulous care, weaving forensic science, witness recollections, and the suspect's own words into a narrative designed to withstand relentless scrutiny. Defense attorneys prepared their counterarguments, probing for procedural missteps, alternative explanations, any fissure through which doubt might seep. The stage was set for a battle not only over guilt, but over memory, interpretation, and the fragile reliability of evidence preserved across decades. For Ridgewood, the reopening of the case was both cathartic and destabilizing. Old suspicions resurfaced. Long-forgotten rumors regained currency. Neighbors reevaluated past interactions, replaying conversations, scrutinizing gestures, searching for clues they might have missed. Trust, once fractured, splintered further. The realization that a predator could blend so seamlessly into daily life cast a long shadow, one that stretched across schoolyards, grocery aisles, and quiet evening walks. Yet amid the turmoil, a singular purpose unified the town: to honor Emily Carter not as a headline, not as a cautionary tale, but as a person whose life had been brutally interrupted. Her photographs reappeared in shop windows and community centers, capturing her laughter, her warmth, her dreams. Stories surfaced of her kindness, her dedication, her plans for the future. Each remembrance stitched another thread into the fabric of a legacy that refused to be reduced to tragedy alone. As the legal process ground forward, the story continued to unfold, revealing new layers of complexity, new questions that challenged easy conclusions. The confession, though powerful, was not the final word. Evidence still awaited analysis. Witnesses still harbored unspoken memories. The past, once disturbed, refused to settle quietly. And so the cold case, though no longer cold, remained a living force, its heat radiating through every corner of Ridgewood, demanding truth, demanding accountability, demanding that the silence of December 1998 finally be broken in full. The courtroom was built to contain truth, but that morning it felt like a vessel barely capable of holding the weight of 2.5 decades of grief, fear, and unanswered questions. Wooden benches creaked beneath the shifting bodies of reporters, relatives, and townspeople who had come not just to witness a trial, but to reclaim a piece of their stolen past. The air vibrated with whispered conversations, the rustle of paper, the muted click of camera shutters, all layered beneath a tense stillness that hung like fog. When the accused was led in, wrists bound, eyes hollow, a shudder rippled through the room, the collective intake of breath from a community confronting the physical embodiment of its longest nightmare. Prosecutors began by rewinding time, dragging the court back to December 1998, reconstructing Emily Carter's final hours with clinical precision. They spoke of her routine, her habits, the grocery receipt timestamped at 6:47 p.m., the surveillance frame capturing her silhouette as she entered her apartment complex, the abrupt silence that followed. They described the quiet street, the porch light burning long after midnight, the mug of coffee gone cold, the television still glowing, the door left ajar as if an invitation or escape. Each detail landed with surgical force, stitching together a tapestry of dread that felt both intimate and unbearable. Jurors leaned forward, pens hovering above notepads, as if proximity alone might grant them clearer understanding. The defense countered with restraint, cautioning against the seductive simplicity of hindsight. They questioned the integrity of decades-old evidence, the reliability of memory stretched thin by time, the possibility of contamination, coincidence, or misinterpretation. They reminded the court that a confession born under pressure might be shaped by fear rather than truth. Yet, even as they spoke, the prosecution unfurled the forensic narrative, thread by thread, weaving science into story. The bracelet clasp, the skin cells embedded within its fractured metal, the DNA profile emerging from obscurity, its match echoing across national databases like a thunderclap. The science was meticulous, the margins of error infinitesimal. The room absorbed the implications in stunned silence. Witnesses followed, each voice adding texture and depth to the unfolding portrait. A former coworker described seeing a man loiter near the building, his gaze lingering, his posture tense. A neighbor recounted the idling sedan, its presence a quiet anomaly in a neighborhood defined by routine. A forensic analyst detailed the painstaking process of extracting genetic material from microscopic traces, the moment when a screen flashed with a name, igniting a chain reaction that would reverberate across states and years. Their testimonies converged into a single, relentless narrative, pressing forward with the inexorable momentum of truth long delayed. Yet the most harrowing moments arrived when Emily's parents took the stand. Their voices trembled as they spoke of a daughter whose laughter once filled their home, of holidays marked by empty chairs, of birthdays celebrated in silence. They described the years of waiting, the cycles of hope and despair, the phone calls that never came, the nights haunted by imagined scenarios. Their grief was raw, unfiltered, a visceral reminder that behind every statistic lay a family suspended in limbo. Tears traced slow paths down weathered faces as they recounted the day they were told her remains had been found, the final confirmation of a loss they had carried in their bones for decades. The defendant listened, his expression a shifting mosaic of detachment and discomfort. At times, he stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, as if bracing against a storm. At others, his gaze dropped to the floor, shoulders sagging beneath an invisible burden. When his confession was introduced into evidence, the room seemed to contract, the walls drawing closer as if to bear witness. His recorded voice, stripped of bravado, recounted obsession, fixation, a chance encounter metastasizing into compulsion. He spoke of watching, waiting, convincing himself of intimacy where none existed, of a confrontation that spiraled into irreversible violence. The tape ended in heavy silence, broken only by the faint hum of overhead lights. But the story refused to remain simple. Under cross-examination, cracks appeared. Timelines wavered. Specifics blurred. The defense seized on these inconsistencies, suggesting embellishment, selective memory, the possibility of coercion. They introduced alternative theories, shadowy figures, unverified sightings, speculative motives, anything to fracture the prosecution's narrative. The jury absorbed it all, their faces a study in concentration, the weight of responsibility etched into every furrowed brow. The truth, once elusive, now stood contested, a fragile construct balanced atop a mountain of evidence and doubt. Beyond the courthouse, Ridgewood existed in a state of suspended animation. Cafes buzzed with hushed debate. School hallways echoed with whispered theories. Evening news broadcasts replayed courtroom sketches and soundbites, each frame dissected for hidden meaning. The case dominated every conversation, its gravity bending daily life around its orbit. For some, the trial offered a path toward closure. For others, it reopened old suspicions, reignited dormant fears, and sharpened the awareness of vulnerability. The town felt simultaneously united and fractured, bound by shared history yet divided by interpretation. Investigators, though largely absent from the public eye, continued their relentless pursuit of clarity. They revisited the excavation site, combed through additional soil samples, cross-referenced recovered fragments with historical weather data and satellite imagery, attempting to reconstruct the precise sequence of events that had led to Emily's remains being scattered and concealed. Each discovery added nuance, complexity, and, at times, discomforting ambiguity. The deeper they dug, the more the narrative resisted neat containment, revealing layers of human frailty, impulse, and consequence that defied easy categorization. Psychological experts weighed in, offering insight into obsession, fixation, and the cognitive distortions that can drive ordinary individuals toward extraordinary acts of violence. They spoke of fantasy loops, of entitlement, of the perilous erosion of empathy. Their analyses painted a portrait not of a monster in the abstract, but of a human being whose unchecked impulses had cascaded into catastrophe. The implication unsettled the community. If such darkness could grow unnoticed in plain sight, what safeguards truly existed? As the trial progressed, the emotional toll intensified. Jurors wrestled with the burden of judgment, acutely aware that their decision would echo across countless lives. Emily's family endured the relentless replay of trauma, each testimony reopening wounds barely scarred. The accused confronted the irrevocable consequences of his actions, his fate suspended between condemnation and the faint possibility of leniency. The courtroom became a crucible, its atmosphere thick with anticipation and dread. Then came the closing arguments, a final collision of logic and emotion. The prosecution spoke of accountability, of the sanctity of life, of a community's right to safety and truth. They invoked the long arc of justice, bending at last toward resolution. The defense cautioned against certainty, urging restraint, warning of the irreversible cost of error. Their words lingered in the air, competing currents shaping the jury's deliberations. Behind closed doors, the jurors debated, dissected, and deliberated, their discussions stretching late into the night. They weighed forensic data against human testimony, confession against contradiction, probability against doubt. Every argument circled back to the same haunting question: what truly happened on that winter night in 1998? The answer, they knew, would never be complete, never fully satisfying, yet they were tasked with forging a verdict from fragments of a shattered past. Outside, Ridgewood waited. Streetlights cast long shadows across empty sidewalks. Windows glowed with sleepless vigil. The town's collective breath hovered, poised between hope and apprehension. In the stillness, memories resurfaced. The first missing posters, the candlelit marches, the endless years of uncertainty. The case had shaped a generation, embedding itself into the fabric of daily life, a constant reminder of fragility and resilience intertwined. As dawn approached, the jury emerged, faces drawn, eyes heavy. The courtroom reconvened, every seat filled, every heartbeat amplified. The verdict, when delivered, would reverberate far beyond those walls, reshaping the narrative of a community and sealing the legacy of a life cut short. Yet even before the words were spoken, one truth was undeniable. The cold case, once a frozen mystery, had become a living testament to persistence, to the relentless pursuit of answers, and to the enduring echo of a young woman's absence. And still, beneath the formalities of law and procedure, beneath the headlines and sound bites, a deeper question pulsed, unresolved, insistent. Could any verdict, any sentence, ever restore what had been taken? Could closure truly exist, or was it merely a fragile illusion crafted to soften the edges of unbearable loss? In the hush before the decision, Ridgewood confronted not only the fate of a man, but the enduring shadow of a night that had forever altered its sense of safety, its understanding of trust, and its collective memory. The verdict arrived like a sudden change in weather, a single word capable of altering the emotional climate of an entire town.
Guilty.
The sound of it rippled through the courtroom, a low murmur swelling into restrained gasps, muffled sobs, and the scrape of chairs against polished wood. Emily's parents clutched each other's hands, their knuckles white, their faces etched with a grief that no judgment could erase, yet softened by the fragile relief of acknowledgement. Across the aisle, the defendant stood motionless, his expression fixed in a hollow stare, as if the word had struck him not as a blow, but as an inevitable conclusion long foreseen. Cameras flashed. Pens scratched across notepads. Outside, church bells tolled, their solemn cadence echoing across Ridgewood streets, signaling an ending that felt less like closure and more like a pause in a story that refused to truly end. Sentencing was scheduled weeks later, a span of time that stretched unbearably for those still trapped in the gravity of the case. In that interim, investigators returned once more to the fragments left behind, determined to reconstruct every remaining detail of Emily Carter's final hours. They re-examined call logs, recalibrated timelines, and mapped the suspect's movements with forensic precision. Each step, each detour, each pause became a point of inquiry. Surveillance footage from distant gas stations, toll booths, and parking garages was synchronized, revealing a mosaic of motion across a cold December night. The pattern suggested intent, a deliberate choreography of approach and retreat, as if the act itself had been rehearsed in the quiet corridors of obsession. The suspect's confession, once thought comprehensive, now appeared skeletal, its omissions glaring. Under renewed questioning, he conceded to disposing of evidence, to discarding clothing, to washing his car under the glare of fluorescent lights at an all-night self-service station. Traces of bleach residue, long dismissed as routine maintenance, took on new significance. Investigators uncovered a storage locker rented under an alias, its contents a chilling catalog of the aftermath, a pair of worn boots caked with soil, a jacket bearing faint, degraded bloodstains, a roll of duct tape hardened by age. Each item was a silent witness, a physical echo of violence that refused to be silenced. The deeper they delved, the more the narrative of that night sharpened. Emily had not been taken immediately. The confrontation in her apartment, as reconstructed through forensic patterns and neighbor testimony, appeared prolonged, marked by escalating tension and desperate attempts at escape. A faint smear on the wall, once overlooked, suggested a struggle. A scuffed baseboard hinted at hurried movement. These details, insignificant in isolation, coalesced into a tableau of fear and resistance, a final stand etched invisibly into the architecture of her home. For her family, the revelations were agonizing, yet they demanded to know, to confront the truth in its entirety, no matter how devastating. Sentencing day arrived beneath a slate-gray sky, the courthouse steps slick with rain. Inside, the atmosphere was electric, charged with anticipation and dread. Victim impact statements filled the chamber, each voice layering sorrow upon sorrow. Friends spoke of shared laughter, of dreams interrupted, of a future stolen. Co-workers recounted the small kindnesses that had defined Emily's presence, the empty desk that still seemed to wait for her return. Her parents, their resolve fortified by years of endurance, addressed the court with trembling clarity, their words a testament to resilience forged in unimaginable pain. They spoke not of vengeance, but of memory, of the enduring imprint of a daughter whose life had been reduced, in the public eye, to a case number and a headline. The judge listened in solemn silence, then delivered a sentence that reverberated with finality: life without the possibility of parole. The gavel's strike echoed like a gunshot, sealing the fate of a man and, in a sense, closing a chapter that had remained stubbornly open for 26 years. The defendant was led away, his figure receding down a corridor of polished stone, leaving behind a courtroom heavy with conflicting emotions. Relief mingled with grief, justice with emptiness, resolution with the inescapable truth that no punishment could restore what had been lost. In the weeks that followed, Ridgewood attempted to resume its routines, yet the case lingered in every shadowed corner. The grocery store where Emily had last been seen rearranged its aisles, installed new lighting, upgraded security cameras. Her apartment, once a symbol of intrusion, underwent renovation, its walls repainted, its floors refinished, yet the memory of that December night clung to the space like a residual chill. Neighbors greeted one another with heightened awareness, their smiles tentative, their conversations tinged with caution. The town had learned, irrevocably, that safety was neither guaranteed nor permanent. Memorials sprang up in unexpected places. A bench in the park bore Emily's name, its smooth surface engraved with a simple inscription, "Remember." A scholarship fund was established in her honor, supporting young women pursuing careers in healthcare, a quiet continuation of her unrealized ambitions. Candlelight vigils evolved into annual gatherings, moments of collective reflection that bound the community through shared remembrance. Each flame flickering against the night served as both tribute and warning, a reminder of vulnerability and resilience intertwined. Yet even as public rituals offered solace, private reckonings unfolded behind closed doors. Investigators grappled with lingering questions. Could the case have been solved sooner? Had subtle signs been missed? They pored over early reports, scrutinized decision points, identified gaps in communication and resource allocation. Their findings spurred policy changes, investments in cold case units, and the creation of centralized databases designed to prevent similar delays in the future. The tragedy became a catalyst for reform, its lessons etched into procedural memory. For Emily's family, life settled into a fragile equilibrium. The long wait for answers had ended, yet the ache of absence remained a constant companion. They navigated ordinary days with extraordinary courage, finding moments of peace in memories, in small acts of kindness, in the knowledge that their daughter's story had, at last, been heard. Closure, they discovered, was not a destination, but a process, an ongoing negotiation between grief and acceptance. Across the state, the case ignited renewed interest in other unresolved disappearances. Tips surged. Evidence was re-examined. Dormant investigations stirred to life. The ripple effect extended far beyond Ridgewood, reminding communities everywhere that time, though relentless, need not be an ally to injustice. The past could be revisited. Silence could be broken. Truth, however delayed, could still emerge. And yet, beneath these forward movements, an undercurrent of unease persisted. The realization that a predator had lived undetected among them for years unsettled deeply held assumptions about familiarity and trust. Conversations about safety grew more urgent, more nuanced. Parents spoke to children about awareness. Neighbors checked on one another with renewed vigilance. The town's social fabric tightened, woven together by shared vulnerability and collective resolve. As seasons turned, the headlines faded, replaced by new stories, new crises, new distractions. But in Ridgewood, the echoes of December 1998 never fully receded. They lingered in the hush of early mornings, in the glow of streetlights at dusk, in the subtle tightening of breath when footsteps approached too quickly from behind. The cold case, though solved in the eyes of the law, remained an indelible imprint on the town's psyche, a reminder that the past is never truly past. And in that lingering echo, a final question whispered through the corridors of memory. How many other stories waited, buried beneath years of silence, yearning for the moment when technology, persistence, and human determination would converge to bring them back into the light? The answer lay scattered across countless evidence boxes, faded files, and unmarked graves, each a testament to the enduring necessity of vigilance, of empathy, and of the relentless pursuit of truth. The years that followed the sentencing did not soften the story's edges. They sharpened them. With distance came reflection, and with reflection, a deeper, more unsettling understanding of what the case truly represented. Ridgewood had not merely endured a tragedy, it had become a symbol of how easily normalcy could be punctured, how swiftly the ordinary could give way to the incomprehensible. The town learned to live again, but it did so with a heightened awareness, every routine shadowed by memory, every quiet night carrying the faint echo of unanswered questions. Cold case units across California took notice. Emily Carter's investigation became a blueprint, a case study in perseverance and technological evolution. Detectives from neighboring counties traveled to Ridgewood to pore over records, to dissect strategy, to learn how a handful of microscopic cells had reopened a door sealed for decades. Evidence lockers were reopened. Dusty boxes were lifted from shelves. Swabs were retested. Old fingerprints were scanned into modern databases. The past was no longer static. It was fluid, malleable, waiting for science to breathe new life into its silence. As new breakthroughs rippled outward, a grim pattern emerged. Dozens of disappearances once written off as accidents, runaways, or isolated tragedies began to reveal faint, chilling connections. Similar methods, comparable timelines, overlapping geographic corridors. Investigators traced these threads, mapping them across highways, bus routes, forgotten back roads. Each line on the map hinted at a broader, darker tapestry, suggesting that Emily's case might be only one fragment of a much larger, more complex narrative. Whispers of a potential serial offender circulated through law enforcement circles, tentative and cautious. The idea was both compelling and terrifying. Could the man convicted of Emily's murder have been responsible for other vanishings? His transient lifestyle, his pattern of short-term employment, his history of relocation painted a portrait of mobility that aligned disturbingly well with clusters of unresolved cases. Analysts constructed timelines, overlaying his known movements with dates of disappearances. The overlaps were subtle but persistent, a constellation of coincidences too dense to ignore. Federal agencies were consulted. Task forces assembled. Databases were cross-referenced on a scale never before attempted. The goal was audacious, to transform decades of fragmented data into a cohesive narrative, to illuminate patterns obscured by time and jurisdictional boundaries. Each potential link was scrutinized, debated, verified, or discarded. The process was exhaustive, often maddeningly slow, yet propelled by a shared conviction that the truth, however sprawling, could still be assembled from its scattered remnants. Meanwhile, the convicted man remained largely silent. In prison, he withdrew from the spotlight, declining interviews, refusing correspondence. Yet occasionally, fragments of information surfaced, filtered through counselors, fellow inmates, or recorded therapy sessions. He spoke of dreams haunted by faces he could not always name, of long drives through empty landscapes, of moments when compulsion overpowered restraint. These utterances, vague and unsettling, fueled speculation, prompting renewed interrogations and psychological evaluations. Each session sought to penetrate the barriers of denial and self-protection, to extract clarity from ambiguity. For Emily's family, these developments reopened old wounds. The possibility that her death might be part of a larger pattern was both horrifying and strangely validating. It suggested that the forces at work extended beyond a singular obsession, that the tragedy, while deeply personal, intersected with a broader current of violence. They grappled with conflicting emotions, the desire for complete truth versus the exhaustion of endless inquiry. Their grief, long shaped by singular loss, now stretched to accommodate the suffering of countless others. Community response oscillated between vigilance and fatigue. Public forums convened to discuss safety, mental health resources, and the role of community awareness in crime prevention. Neighborhood watch programs expanded. Schools integrated discussions of personal security into their curricula. Yet beneath these proactive measures lay a pervasive weariness, a collective longing for the quiet certainty of days unburdened by fear. The town's resilience was tested, its capacity for sustained alertness stretched thin. Investigators pressed forward, guided by the faint hope that uncovering a larger pattern might grant meaning to decades of anguish. They revisited archived cases from the late 1980s and 1990s, interviewing families who had long since resigned themselves to uncertainty. Each conversation carried emotional gravity, a delicate balance of empathy and inquiry. Some relatives clung to the promise of answers. Others recoiled, wary of reopening scars that had barely begun to heal. The human cost of investigation became starkly evident, a reminder that every cold case represented not only a mystery, but a constellation of lives suspended in unresolved grief. As connections multiplied, so did complexity. Not all evidence aligned neatly. Some disappearances defied categorization. Others hinted at different perpetrators, distinct motives. The emerging picture was less a single predator than a landscape of vulnerability, a period marked by systemic blind spots and limited technological reach. This realization reframed the narrative, shifting focus from individual culpability to collective responsibility. How many crimes had slipped through the cracks of fragmented systems? How many victims had been rendered invisible by jurisdictional boundaries and resource constraints? The story of Emily Carter, once singular, now stood as a lens through which these broader failures could be examined. Conferences were organized. Policy papers circulated. Funding initiatives launched. The case became a rallying point for advocates of forensic innovation and interagency collaboration. Its legacy extended beyond resolution, shaping practices and priorities in ways that promised to alter the future of criminal investigation. Yet despite these forward strides, the emotional core of the story remained stubbornly anchored in 1998. Each technological triumph circled back to the same foundational truth. A young woman had vanished, leaving behind a void no advancement could fill. Her memory persisted not as a data point, but as a living presence, woven into the daily consciousness of those who had known her. In moments of quiet, her laughter seemed to echo faintly through familiar spaces, a ghostly reminder of all that had been lost. In prison, the man responsible confronted the monotony of confinement, days blurring into one another in a relentless cycle of routine. Reports described him as withdrawn, introspective, occasionally volatile. Psychologists probed the origins of his obsession, tracing threads back to childhood trauma, social isolation, and distorted self-perception. Their analyses, while illuminating, offered little solace. Understanding motive did not mitigate consequence. Explanation did not equal absolution. The possibility of additional confessions loomed, tantalizing yet elusive. Each rumor ignited speculation, each hint of cooperation sparking renewed anticipation. Families of other missing individuals watched anxiously, their hopes oscillating between cautious optimism and protective skepticism. The promise of answers dangled just beyond reach, a fragile thread connecting disparate tragedies across time and space. As the investigation widened, it confronted not only the limits of technology, but the boundaries of human endurance. Detectives aged. Witnesses passed away. Memories faded. Evidence degraded. The race against time intensified, underscoring the urgency of action and the profound consequences of delay. The case became a testament to both the potential and the fragility of justice, a reminder that truth, though resilient, required vigilant guardianship. And through it all, Ridgewood endured. Its streets remained lined with familiar homes. Its parks echoed with children's laughter. Its shops bustled with everyday commerce. Life, in all its stubborn ordinariness, persisted. Yet beneath this surface continuity pulsed an undercurrent of vigilance, a collective consciousness shaped by loss and resolve. The town had learned to carry its history, not as a burden, but as a mandate, to remember, to protect, to seek truth without surrender. The cold case, though officially closed, had become something else entirely, a catalyst, a mirror, a warning. It whispered of the thin line between safety and peril, of the enduring impact of a single night, of the power of persistence in the face of overwhelming odds. And in that whisper lay both a promise and a challenge, that the stories of the lost would not fade into obscurity, that their echoes would continue to guide those who walked the long, uncertain path toward justice. The renewed investigation unfolded like a shadow war, fought in archives and laboratories, across interview rooms and forgotten landscapes, where every grain of dust carried the possibility of revelation. Task forces worked through nights, their desks illuminated by the pale glow of computer screens, mapping movements, cross-checking alibis, building timelines so intricate they resembled webs spun from memory and data. The name Emily Carter remained at the center, a gravitational force pulling disparate threads toward a single, haunting focal point. Her case was no longer an isolated tragedy. It had become the keystone in a structure of unresolved disappearances stretching across decades. Old evidence, once dismissed as inconclusive, was resurrected. Fingernail scrapings, hair fragments, degraded fibers, and partial footprints were subjected to next-generation analysis, their molecular secrets coaxed back into visibility. Each successful extraction felt like a small resurrection, a voice returning from silence. Yet with every breakthrough came the sobering realization of how much had been lost to time, samples that had degraded beyond use, records destroyed in floods or fires, witnesses whose memories had blurred into abstraction. The past, though stubborn, was not infinitely patient. Geographic profilers traced the suspect's life in reverse, plotting his relocations across California and neighboring states. Temporary jobs, short-term leases, seasonal labor, and transient social connections formed a pattern of constant movement, a nomadic existence that evaded sustained scrutiny. In this restless trajectory, analysts identified clusters of unresolved cases: young women who vanished near highways, hitchhikers last seen entering unfamiliar vehicles, late-night service workers who never returned home. Each case carried its own narrative of loss, yet when layered atop one another, they hinted at a chilling coherence. Families were contacted cautiously, the conversations conducted with measured compassion. Investigators knew that hope could be as devastating as despair. They presented possibilities, not promises, inviting relatives to share memories, photographs, personal artifacts that might yield genetic material. Some responded with guarded optimism, others with quiet resignation. Years of unanswered questions had tempered expectations, yet the chance, however slim, of resolution proved irresistible. Across living rooms and kitchen tables, stories long suppressed resurfaced, each recollection a fragile bridge between past and present. The emotional toll on investigators deepened. They absorbed grief secondhand, carrying fragments of countless lives within their own. Sleeplessness became routine. The boundaries between professional detachment and personal empathy blurred.
Some sought counseling.
Others leaned on camaraderie, their shared burden forging bonds as resilient as steel. The work was relentless, its stakes unyielding. Each potential link represented not merely an academic exercise, but the possibility of returning dignity and truth to families suspended in uncertainty. In parallel, forensic genealogy emerged as a transformative force. Genetic profiles from unidentified remains and unsolved cases were uploaded to public databases, searching for distant relatives whose shared DNA might illuminate hidden lineages. The process was painstaking, often yielding only faint hints: a second cousin here, a third cousin there, distant branches of family trees stretching into obscurity. Yet slowly connections materialized. Names surfaced. Histories unfolded. The anonymous began to reclaim identity, their stories inching back into the realm of the known. One such breakthrough reverberated with particular intensity. Remains discovered near a desert highway in 2003, long classified as Jane Doe, were finally identified as a college student who had vanished while driving home for the holidays. Her last phone call, once an indecipherable fragment, now aligned with the suspect's known travel route that winter. Soil samples matched. Fibers corresponded. The pattern sharpened, each new case a grim punctuation mark in a narrative of sustained predation. The scope of the tragedy expanded, its contours growing ever more defined. Public reaction oscillated between outrage and sorrow. The revelation that multiple lives might have been claimed intensified demands for accountability, for systemic reform, for guarantees that such failures would not recur. Lawmakers convened hearings. Advocacy groups mobilized. Funding for cold case units surged. The collective conscience stirred, compelled by the realization that vigilance must extend beyond individual cases to encompass the structures that governed justice itself. For Emily's family, the widening investigation brought a complicated solace. Her story, once solitary, now served as a beacon, guiding others toward answers. The knowledge that her case had catalyzed such far-reaching efforts imbued her memory with renewed purpose. Yet each new identification also rekindled grief, a reminder of the countless lives extinguished, the futures erased. They attended memorials for strangers, their empathy forged through shared suffering, their presence a silent affirmation of solidarity. Within prison walls, the convicted man faced renewed scrutiny. Investigators confronted him with emerging evidence, timelines, and genetic links. At first, he retreated into silence, his defenses hardened by the enormity of accusation. But isolation, combined with the relentless presentation of facts, began to erode his resistance. In fragmented admissions, he acknowledged encounters, fleeting moments that escalated beyond intent, a pattern of compulsion he claimed to barely comprehend. Each confession was partial, contested, laden with ambiguity, yet collectively they sketched a harrowing portrait of sustained violence. Psychological evaluations probed deeper, uncovering a history of trauma, alienation, and maladaptive coping mechanisms. Experts debated the interplay of choice and pathology, of responsibility and compulsion. Their analyses, though nuanced, could not soften the brutality of outcome. Understanding motive illuminated process, not consequence. The human cost remained incalculable. As the investigation advanced, its sheer scale necessitated unprecedented cooperation. Local police departments, state agencies, federal bureaus, and international partners pooled resources and intelligence. Information flowed across borders, dissolving the barriers that had once siloed knowledge. The collaborative network functioned as a living organism, adaptive and responsive, its collective memory far surpassing any single institution's capacity. In this convergence lay both hope and caution. Hope that unity could overcome fragmentation, caution that such unity must be sustained to prevent future failures. Yet, even amid progress, uncertainty persisted. Not all cases aligned. Some remained stubbornly opaque, their origins elusive, their perpetrators unknown. The possibility of multiple offenders, overlapping patterns, and coincidental similarities complicated interpretation. Analysts grappled with these ambiguities, aware that the desire for coherence could inadvertently impose false order upon chaos. The pursuit of truth demanded humility, a willingness to accept complexity and resist premature conclusions. The emotional landscape mirrored this tension. Each solved case delivered a measure of closure, yet unveiled new questions. Each identification restored a name, yet underscored the multitude still missing. The journey toward comprehensive understanding stretched endlessly forward, its horizon perpetually receding. Investigators learned to navigate this paradox, sustaining momentum amid perpetual incompleteness. In Ridgewood, the annual memorial for Emily evolved into a broader commemoration, honoring all victims whose stories remained unresolved. Candles flickered in long rows, their collective glow transforming the town square into a constellation of remembrance. Names were read aloud, each syllable a quiet defiance against oblivion. The ceremony transcended individual loss, embodying a communal vow that silence would not prevail, that the forgotten would be sought, that the dead would be remembered. As the night deepened, the murmured prayers and whispered conversations coalesced into a shared resonance, a collective heartbeat pulsing with grief, resolve, and fragile hope. In that moment, the cold case, once a solitary enigma, stood revealed as part of a vast, interconnected human story, one defined not solely by violence, but by resilience, compassion, and the relentless pursuit of truth. And still, beyond the reach of lamplight and ceremony, countless mysteries lingered, suspended in the dark. Each awaited its moment, its convergence of persistence and chance, its passage from silence into voice. The work continued, unceasing, propelled by the conviction that every life, no matter how obscured by time, deserved to be found, to be known, and to be honored. The momentum built relentlessly, carrying investigators, families, and entire communities forward on a tide of revelation that refused to recede. Each solved fragment intensified the urgency of what remained unknown, transforming the pursuit of truth into a race against erosion, of memory, of evidence, of time itself. The cold case ecosystem had evolved into a living network, pulsing with data, emotion, and resolve, its arteries stretching across jurisdictions and generations. At its core lay a singular conviction that no disappearance was too old, no silence too deep, to be confronted. In distant towns, far removed from Ridgewood, the reverberations were felt with startling clarity. Families who had long resigned themselves to ambiguity received calls that cracked open sealed histories. Investigators arrived bearing folders thick with documentation, their questions gentle yet piercing. Kitchen tables became makeshift command centers, cluttered with faded photographs, handwritten notes, and relics of lives interrupted. Each interview was an excavation, unearthing memories layered with hope, guilt, and unspoken regret. In these intimate exchanges, the abstract notion of justice took on human contours, shaped by trembling hands and tear-filled eyes. Patterns emerged not as neat lines, but as overlapping shadows. Some victims had vanished near service stations, others at roadside diners, bus terminals, or lonely intersections where highways converged. The geography suggested opportunism, a predator attuned to transience, to places where anonymity flourished. Analysts traced these coordinates, overlaying them with seasonal employment cycles, transportation routes, and economic shifts of the late 1990s and early 2000s. The resulting maps resembled constellations of loss, each point a life abruptly diverted into darkness. Within this expanding framework, Emily Carter's story retained its central gravity. Her case provided the initial fracture through which light had entered, and her memory guided each subsequent step. Investigators often returned to her file, recalibrating their understanding in light of new evidence, searching for parallels that might illuminate both past and future. Her apartment, long since renovated and occupied, remained a symbolic epicenter, a reminder of how ordinary spaces could harbor extraordinary tragedy. The psychological toll deepened. Detectives found themselves haunted by the cumulative weight of stories, their dreams crowded with unfamiliar faces, their waking hours punctuated by intrusive recollections. Many described a persistent sense of hypervigilance, an inability to fully disengage, as if the unresolved cases exerted a gravitational pull that followed them home. Support systems were expanded, counseling encouraged, peer networks strengthened. Yet even with these safeguards, the emotional residue proved inescapable, a testament to the profound human cost of sustained exposure to trauma. Media attention surged anew, amplifying both awareness and pressure. Documentaries dissected timelines. Podcasts reconstructed theories. Social platforms buzzed with speculation, amateur sleuths sifting through public records in search of hidden connections. While some contributions proved valuable, others muddied waters, introducing conjecture that complicated official efforts. Investigators navigated this landscape cautiously, balancing transparency with the imperative to preserve evidentiary integrity. The line between public engagement and procedural compromise grew increasingly delicate. Amid this cacophony, moments of clarity emerged. One by one, unidentified remains regained names, their stories reclaimed from anonymity. A teenager who had disappeared after concert. A single mother last seen at a rest stop. A migrant worker whose absence had gone unreported for months. Each identification reverberated through families and communities, triggering waves of grief, relief, and solemn acknowledgement. The act of naming restored dignity, anchoring fleeting existence within the permanence of memory. In prison, the man at the center of the investigation receded further into isolation. The accumulation of evidence, the relentless questioning, and the gravity of potential additional charges converged to fracture his psychological defenses. In sporadic interviews, he spoke of an internal compulsion he could neither articulate nor restrain, of moments when reality dissolved into fixation, of a pervasive emptiness he sought to fill through domination and control. His words, though chilling, offered limited solace. Understanding his psyche illuminated pathways of prevention, yet underscored the irreparable harm inflicted upon countless lives. Psychiatrists debated diagnoses, parsing the interplay of trauma, personality disorder, and environmental influence. Their conclusions, meticulously documented, informed emerging strategies for early intervention and risk assessment. The aim was not merely to explain past violence, but to forestall its recurrence. Programs emphasizing mental health support, community integration, and crisis identification gained traction, their implementation fueled by the stark lessons of failure and loss. The legal system, too, evolved. Legislators introduced reforms addressing evidence preservation, interagency data sharing, and the allocation of resources to cold case units. Statutes of limitation were revisited. Funding streams redirected. The case catalyzed a re-examination of institutional priorities, compelling authorities to confront the systemic vulnerabilities that had allowed such prolonged impunity. In these changes lay the promise of a more responsive, resilient framework for justice. Yet despite progress, shadows persisted. Not every disappearance aligned with the emerging narrative. Some cases resisted integration, their details incompatible, their origins inscrutable. The possibility of additional perpetrators of intersecting patterns loomed large. Investigators approached these anomalies with humility, wary of forcing coherence where none existed. The pursuit of truth demanded patience, an acceptance of uncertainty, and a steadfast commitment to complexity. For the families, this ambiguity was both burden and impetus. The absence of definitive answers sustained their advocacy, fueling campaigns for continued investigation and remembrance. They formed networks of mutual support, sharing strategies for endurance, commemorating milestones, and amplifying one another's voices. Through collective action, they transformed private grief into public resolve, ensuring that the lost would not slip quietly into oblivion. In Ridgewood, the legacy of the cold case reshaped civic identity. Annual forums fostered dialogue on safety, mental health, and community cohesion. Public art installations honored victims, their silhouettes etched against brick and stone, their stories interwoven with local history. These expressions served not only as memorials, but as conduits for collective healing, spaces where sorrow could be acknowledged and transmuted into solidarity. As the investigation marched forward, it became clear that resolution was not a singular event, but an ongoing process, a continuum of discovery, reflection, and reform. Each answer generated new questions. Each breakthrough revealed further depths. The pursuit of justice, far from concluding, expanded in scope and significance, its trajectory shaped by the interplay of science, empathy, and unwavering determination. And in the quiet intervals between revelations, when the hum of activity subsided, a persistent stillness lingered, a reminder of the void at the heart of every cold case. It was in this silence that the true weight of loss resided, an absence that no amount of knowledge could fully dispel. Yet within that absence also lay a profound call to action, a summons to remember, to seek, to protect, and to persist. For as long as even one story remained unfinished, the work would continue, propelled by the conviction that every life mattered, that every truth deserved illumination, and that even in the deepest darkness, the faintest glimmer of understanding could guide the way forward. The deeper the investigation cut into the sediment of time, the more it revealed a hidden topography of fear, silence, and missed connections, a vast subterranean network of stories that had never found their way into daylight. Each newly opened file was a sealed chamber, its contents preserved in the amber of uncertainty, waiting for the precise convergence of persistence and chance to be unlocked. And with every chamber breached, the enormity of what had been lost became more apparent, its scale staggering, its implications inescapable. In laboratories humming with controlled intensity, technicians worked with fragments so minute they bordered on invisibility. A few cells trapped beneath a fingernail, a smear of sweat absorbed into fabric, a hair strand fused into carpet fibers by decades of pressure. These remnants, once dismissed as forensic noise, now spoke volumes under the scrutiny of modern science. Algorithms parsed genetic sequences, searching for kinship among millions of profiles. Each match, however distant, sparked a chain reaction of inquiry, branching outward into family trees that spanned continents and generations. The pursuit of identity became a global endeavor, collapsing borders in the service of memory. Across the country, doors opened to investigators bearing quiet authority and measured compassion. They stepped into living rooms heavy with the stillness of grief, into kitchens where untouched place settings lingered as silent witnesses, into bedrooms preserved like shrines. In each space, the absence of a loved one was palpable, a pressure in the air, an echo in every corner. Conversations unfolded slowly, haltingly, as relatives recounted the last ordinary moments before disappearance transformed life irrevocably. Laughter shared, arguments unresolved, plans postponed. Every detail was a thread, potentially linking past to present, lost to understanding. As connections multiplied, the narrative of a single predator began to fracture into a mosaic of intersecting trajectories. Some cases aligned with chilling precision, their timelines and geographies converging around the convicted man's known movements. Others diverged, suggesting parallel patterns of violence, independent yet disturbingly similar. The realization unsettled investigators. The landscape they navigated was not a singular labyrinth, but a sprawling maze, its corridors branching endlessly, its walls etched with the names of the forgotten. This complexity demanded a recalibration of strategy. Task forces expanded their scope, incorporating specialists in behavioral analysis, criminology, sociology, and data science. Multidisciplinary teams convened, their discussions weaving disparate perspectives into cohesive hypotheses. Patterns were no longer sought solely in physical evidence, but in socioeconomic shifts, migration trends, and cultural contexts. The crimes were reframed not merely as individual acts, but as manifestations of broader systemic vulnerabilities, moments when societal fractures intersected with personal pathology. Media narratives struggled to keep pace. Simplistic portrayals of a singular villain gave way to more nuanced explorations of context and causality. Documentaries traced the evolution of investigative techniques. Long-form journalism delved into the human stories behind statistical abstractions. Podcasts amplified the voices of families, their testimonies resonating with raw authenticity. The public's understanding matured, moving beyond sensationalism toward a deeper engagement with the complexities of crime, trauma, and resilience. Yet with heightened awareness came renewed anxiety. Communities reevaluated their own histories, revisiting unresolved disappearances, unexplained deaths, and persistent rumors. Old suspicions resurfaced. Forgotten leads were resurrected. The collective memory stirred, its latent unease rising to the surface. Town halls filled with citizens demanding transparency, accountability, and proactive measures. Law enforcement agencies, under intensified scrutiny, navigated a delicate balance between openness and operational necessity. In Ridgewood, the epicenter of this unfolding saga, the emotional climate remained taut. The town had become both symbol and participant, its identity inseparable from the cold case that had redefined it. Schools incorporated modules on digital safety and emotional intelligence. Community centers hosted workshops on situational awareness and mental health. These initiatives, while pragmatic, also served as rituals of collective healing, attempts to reclaim a sense of agency in a narrative long dominated by helplessness. Emily Carter's legacy permeated these efforts. Her story, once confined to missing posters and courtroom testimony, evolved into a catalyst for change. Scholarships in her name funded research in forensic science. Advocacy groups invoked her memory in campaigns for legislative reform. Each initiative carried forward a fragment of her presence, transforming loss into momentum, absence into purpose. Meanwhile, investigators confronted the moral weight of their task. Every discovery, while offering clarity, reopened wounds. Informing families of new findings demanded profound sensitivity, an awareness that truth could both console and devastate. Protocols were refined, psychological support embedded into investigative processes, recognizing that justice extended beyond resolution to encompass care for the living. The pursuit of answers, they understood, was inseparable from the obligation to safeguard emotional well-being. The convicted man's role within this expanding narrative grew increasingly ambiguous. While evidence linked him to multiple cases, gaps persisted, leaving open the possibility of accomplices, imitators, or entirely separate perpetrators. Interrogations probed these uncertainties, seeking clarity amid layers of obfuscation and self-preservation. His responses oscillated between partial admissions and strategic silence, each interview a precarious dance between revelation and resistance. The truth, it seemed, would emerge only in fragments, each piece extracted at significant psychological cost. Psychological profiling evolved in tandem, its methodologies refined through the lens of accumulated data. Patterns of behavior, escalation, and selection were analyzed, yielding insights into early warning signs and potential intervention points. These findings informed training programs for educators, social workers, and healthcare providers, equipping them to recognize and respond to indicators of dangerous fixation. The goal was prevention, the interruption of trajectories before they could culminate in irrevocable harm. As years layered upon years, the investigation's scope transcended its origins. What began as a quest to solve a single disappearance matured into a comprehensive reevaluation of how society confronts violence, loss, and accountability. The cold case became a prism through which systemic shortcomings were refracted, revealing opportunities for reform and innovation. In this transformation lay a fragile optimism that from tragedy could emerge a more vigilant, compassionate world. Yet beneath the progress, a persistent melancholy endured. For every story illuminated, countless others remained shrouded. Unmarked graves dotted remote landscapes. Nameless profiles lingered in databases, their identities tantalizingly close yet perpetually elusive. The work, though monumental, was inherently incomplete, its horizon perpetually receding. Investigators learned to measure success not solely in solutions, but in sustained effort, in the refusal to surrender to despair. In quiet moments, when the clamor of analysis subsided, the human dimension reasserted itself. A mother tracing her missing son's face in a faded photograph. A sister recounting a final argument she wished she could undo. A friend preserving voice messages that crackled with youthful exuberance. These intimate gestures anchored the investigation in lived experience, reminding all involved that beyond the data and discourse lay irreplaceable lives, each deserving of remembrance and respect. And so the story advanced, propelled by a convergence of science, empathy, and unwavering resolve. The cold case, once a frozen enigma, had become a dynamic force, reshaping institutions, relationships, and perceptions. Its trajectory underscored a fundamental truth. that the pursuit of justice is not a destination, but a continual journey, one that demands persistence, humility, and an unyielding commitment to the sanctity of human life. In the deepening twilight of unresolved mysteries, a single conviction endured, that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, the relentless search for truth could illuminate pathways toward healing, understanding, and, perhaps, a measure of peace. The interrogation room was bathed in cold white light. The ticking of the wall clock echoed through the silence, each second amplifying the suffocating tension. Across the table, the man sat motionless, his hands tightly clasped, his eyes fixed on the floor. He knew the last walls protecting him were beginning to crumble. The DNA match had only been the opening blow. Investigators still needed something undeniable, a physical, concrete piece of evidence that would finally close a cold case buried for more than 2 decades. And then, the breakthrough came from the most unexpected place. A former warehouse worker, once employed at the auto repair shop the suspect used to frequent, contacted the police. While clearing out old storage, he discovered a locked metal box hidden behind a false wall, thick with dust. Inside were a rusted dagger, several dark-stained fabric scraps, and a lighter engraved with a strange symbol, a perfect match to descriptions recorded in the original case files. When forensic analysts completed their examination, the results stunned the entire lab. The blood on the blade was an exact match to the victim's DNA. The fabric fibers matched the jacket the victim had been wearing on the night of their disappearance. And the lighter, it was the very object a witness had seen in the killer's hand before he vanished into the darkness. The final piece had fallen into place. Back in the interrogation room, detectives laid each item on the table, slowly, deliberately, without a word. Every object struck like a hammer against the suspect's last line of defense. His body began to tremble. Sweat beaded across his forehead. His breathing grew shallow and uneven. Then, after nearly 10 minutes of suffocating silence, he lifted his head. "All right, I'll tell you everything." Those words hit the room like a thunderclap. The truth, buried for more than 20 years, was finally about to surface. But what he was about to confess was darker and more horrifying than anyone had ever imagined. The room seemed to contract around him as the first words slipped from his lips, barely louder than a breath, as if even the air itself might recoil from what was about to be revealed. And in that suspended moment, the decades-long silence of a buried crime finally began to fracture, releasing a story so twisted, so meticulously concealed, that every investigator present felt the chilling certainty that they were standing at the edge of a psychological abyss, staring down into the mind of a man who had lived undetected among ordinary people for more than 20 years. He began with the night itself, his voice uneven, sometimes faltering, sometimes accelerating, as though reliving each moment forced his memory to sprint ahead of his courage, describing how the evening had started with nothing more than a chance encounter, a casual exchange of words that seemed meaningless at the time, how a passing conversation had spiraled into obsession, how something in the victim's expression, a fleeting glance, a dismissive tone, had ignited a long-suppressed fury inside him, an anger he claimed had followed him his entire life, lurking beneath a carefully maintained facade of normalcy, waiting for the smallest spark to detonate. He spoke of following from a distance, his footsteps swallowed by the hum of traffic and the muffled sounds of late-night city life, of watching from across the street as the victim unlocked their car, of feeling a surge of adrenaline so intense it blurred his vision, of gripping the dagger in his pocket until the cold metal numbed his fingers, convincing himself that he was no longer in control, that something older and darker had taken the reins, steering him forward through shadows and silence. The attack, he said, unfolded in seconds, but those seconds stretched into an eternity in his memory, every sound magnified, every movement etched with brutal clarity, the sharp intake of breath, the sudden struggle, the frantic scrape of shoes against pavement, the dull, sickening impact of metal against flesh, and then the unbearable stillness that followed, broken only by his own ragged breathing and the distant echo of sirens far beyond the horizon. He described the panic that seized him afterward, the desperate scramble to erase his presence, to wipe away fingerprints, to drag the body into darkness, to conceal what could never truly be hidden, his mind racing through possibilities, calculations, and lies, constructing a labyrinth of deception in real time, layer upon layer, each choice driven by the singular instinct to survive, to vanish back into the crowd, to become once again invisible. Investigators listened in silence, their pens frozen above notebooks, their recording devices capturing every word, every tremor, every hesitation, knowing that what they were hearing was not just a confession, but the final unraveling of a narrative that had haunted families, terrified communities, and tormented law enforcement for more than 2 decades. He told them where he had hidden the remaining evidence, buried beneath the floorboards of a rented storage unit he had long since abandoned, a place chosen precisely because it existed in the liminal space between ownership and neglect, a forgotten corner of the city where dust and time conspired to bury the past, and as the address was relayed to waiting teams, the room filled with a sense of grim anticipation, the knowledge that the final proof was about to be exhumed. Hours later, officers pried open the warped planks of the storage unit's floor, revealing a shallow cavity packed with plastic-wrapped bundles, and inside them, the missing personal effects of the victim, a watch stopped at the precise moment of the attack, a cracked phone still bearing unsent messages, a wallet containing photographs that froze time in an era forever lost. Each object a silent witness to the life that had been violently extinguished, each one radiating a quiet, devastating gravity that no forensic report could ever fully convey. When the items were presented to the suspect, his composure collapsed entirely, the last remnants of defiance draining from his face as he stared at the relics of his own crime, the physical manifestations of a secret he had carried alone for more than 20 years, a burden that had warped his existence, shaping every decision, every relationship, every moment of feigned normalcy. He spoke then of the aftermath, of the days and weeks that followed the killing, when every siren sounded like a death knell, when every knock at the door sent him into spirals of terror, when sleep became a battlefield of recurring nightmares, replaying the scene again and again with merciless precision. And yet, as time passed and suspicion faded, fear slowly gave way to something more insidious, a chilling sense of invincibility, the intoxicating realization that he had escaped, that the world had moved on, leaving the truth buried beneath headlines and fading memories. He built a life upon that illusion, steady employment, casual friendships, fleeting romances, a routine so ordinary it became camouflage, each day reinforcing the lie that he was just another anonymous figure drifting through the vast machinery of society. But beneath that carefully maintained exterior, the crime never truly loosened its grip, lingering in the shadows of his mind, surfacing in moments of quiet, in sudden flashes of panic, in the hollow emptiness that no amount of distraction could ever fill. Detectives pressed him, demanding details only the perpetrator could know, and he delivered them with disturbing precision, describing the exact angle of the wound, the position of the body, the sequence of movements, information that aligned flawlessly with the original forensic reports, sealing the authenticity of his confession and extinguishing any lingering doubt. Yet even as the case appeared to reach its long-awaited conclusion, new questions began to emerge, unsettling revelations that hinted at a broader, more complex web of secrets, as he alluded to other incidents, other moments of violence that had never been reported, never connected, never investigated, his fragmented admissions opening doors that investigators were only just beginning to glimpse. The interrogations stretched into the early hours of the morning, the sterile room growing heavy with exhaustion and unspoken horror, as the magnitude of his actions settled over everyone present, the realization that a man capable of such calculated brutality had lived freely for decades, brushing shoulders with strangers, blending seamlessly into the fabric of everyday life. Outside, dawn crept across the city, painting the sky in muted hues of gray and pale gold, a stark contrast to the darkness that had just been unearthed, and as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the narrow windows of the station, they illuminated faces etched with disbelief, relief, and a profound sense of unease, the conflicting emotions of a truth finally revealed and the haunting knowledge of all that could never be undone. For the victim's family, the confession would bring a devastating clarity, ending years of agonizing uncertainty, replacing endless questions with a single, unbearable answer. And yet, even as justice inched closer, the weight of loss remained unchanged. The empty chair at the table, the birthdays uncelebrated, the futures forever erased, reminders that no resolution could ever restore what had been taken. As news of the arrest and confession began to ripple through the community, shockwaves spread in widening circles, neighbors grappling with the realization that the monster they had feared for so long had been hiding in plain sight, co-workers replaying years of interactions, searching for signs they had never noticed, strangers poring over headlines in disbelief. Confronted with the unsettling truth that evil does not always announce itself, that sometimes it whispers, waits, and watches, patient and unseen. And within the walls of the precinct, investigators sat in stunned silence, absorbing the gravity of a case that had defined careers, haunted sleepless nights, and tested the limits of perseverance, knowing that while one chapter had finally closed, its echoes would reverberate for years to come, a stark reminder of the fragile boundary between order and chaos, justice and impunity, truth and the endless shadows that conceal it. The cold case was no longer cold, but the chill it left behind would never fade. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read, a silence so dense it seemed to swallow every breath, every heartbeat, every lingering doubt, the culmination of a journey that had begun more than 2 decades earlier in a darkened street where a single life had been violently erased. And in that moment, as the final words echoed off cold marble walls, the weight of 26 years of waiting, of hoping, of despairing, finally collapsed into a single, irreversible truth.
Guilty.
The word landed with devastating force. The victim's family sat frozen, hands clasped, eyes fixed forward, caught between the relief of long-awaited justice and the crushing realization that nothing, not even this verdict, could return what had been taken from them. Their grief had matured in silence, hardened by unanswered questions and endless nights of imagined scenarios, and now, with the truth laid bare, it transformed into something quieter, heavier, a sorrow stripped of illusion, raw and unprotected. Across the room, the man who had lived unseen for so long stared ahead, his expression unreadable, a hollow shell of the person who once walked free among strangers, the final mask falling away under the unblinking gaze of justice. There were no tears, no pleas, only the faint tightening of his jaw, the subtle tremor in his hands, the last remnants of a carefully constructed life dissolving into nothing. The sentence followed swiftly, measured in decades, each number another closing door, another irreversible step toward oblivion, and as the gavel struck, its sharp crack reverberated through the chamber like a gunshot, signaling the definitive end of a story that had tormented an entire community for a generation. Outside, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and the name of the case surged across headlines once more, no longer as a haunting mystery, but as a resolved cold case that had finally surrendered its secrets. Yet even as the world absorbed the news with collective astonishment, a deeper unease lingered beneath the surface, the unsettling recognition that for 26 years, the truth had existed only inches away, hidden behind an ordinary face, a routine existence, a life so unremarkable it became invisible. Investigators returned to their offices with a strange mixture of triumph and exhaustion, the culmination of countless hours spent poring over faded files, re-interviewing reluctant witnesses, chasing dead-end leads, refusing to let the case dissolve into the archives of forgotten tragedies, and now, as the evidence was sealed, the reports finalized, and the last forms signed, they were left with a hollow stillness, the quiet after-storm, the moment when purpose gives way to reflection. They replayed every step, every decision, every missed opportunity, wondering how close they had come, how many times they had brushed against the truth without realizing it, how many subtle signs had gone unnoticed in a world overwhelmed by noise and distraction, and in those reflections lay the enduring lesson of the case, that justice is often not swift, not clean, not guaranteed, but painstakingly assembled from fragments of persistence, patience, and unyielding resolve. In the neighborhood where the crime had first occurred, life continued with cautious normalcy. Children walked to school, shopkeepers opened their doors, commuters hurried past the same street corners that had once been sealed off by flashing lights and yellow tape, but the memory lingered, embedded in whispered conversations, in lingering glances, in the unspoken understanding that something irrevocable had happened there, a shadow woven into the fabric of everyday life. Some residents felt relief, a sense of closure they had long believed impossible. Others felt only a renewed anxiety, the chilling awareness that danger can hide behind familiarity, that the ordinary can harbor the monstrous, that evil does not always announce itself with chaos and spectacle, but often slips quietly into routine, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The victim's name resurfaced in memorials, in articles, in documentaries, spoken aloud once more after years of fading from public consciousness, and in that resurgence, there was a bittersweet vindication, a confirmation that their life, their story, their absence still mattered, that they had not been lost entirely to time. Yet for their loved ones, the days ahead remained an uncertain terrain, a delicate balance between mourning what was gone and rebuilding what could still be salvaged, learning once again how to breathe without the constant weight of uncertainty, how to imagine a future not dominated by unanswered questions, how to carry grief without letting it define every waking moment. As the weeks passed, the case began to settle into history, its details absorbed into the vast archive of solved crimes, its headlines gradually replaced by newer tragedies, newer mysteries, newer shocks, but beneath that inevitable fading, its impact endured, a stark reminder of the persistence required to confront darkness, the patience demanded by truth, and the fragile boundary that separates safety from catastrophe. And somewhere, deep within the silent corridors of memory, the echoes of that night in 1998 continued to reverberate, a distant but unrelenting reminder that even when justice is served, the past never fully releases its grip, that every cold case solved leaves behind a residue of unanswered questions, of roads not taken, of lives altered beyond repair. Because closure, in the truest sense, is an illusion. What remains is understanding. And what lingers is the knowledge that in the vast, shadowed spaces of human existence, there are stories still waiting to be uncovered, voices still waiting to be heard, and truths still buried beneath layers of time, silence, and fear, patient, relentless, and inevitable. The case was closed. But its echo never died.